My name is Mark Hummel, and this is Mark Hummel's Harmonica Party. I'm sitting here with my old partner in crime, R.W. Grigsby.
Howdy, folks.
And we're going to just talk about R.W.'s career in music and his songwriting and life on the road and all the other good stuff that we usually get into. But I want to just start, R.W., with just how you got started in music. You and Wes Starr go back to your teenage years as a rhythm section, and let's just start with, you grew up in Rome, Georgia?
Yeah, I grew up in Rome, Georgia, and
Home of Marjorie Taylor Greene.
yeah, unfortunately, she's the representative, but she's not from Rome, Georgia. I think she's from Dalton or somewhere, which is even farther to the right than Rome, Georgia, if you can believe that. But I tell you, kind of the way I got started in music was, Wes and I started playing together when we were teenagers, but I had gotten into music before then. My dad was he was an amateur banjo player, and he had an antique store out on the Highway 20, Georgia 20, and we called it the Alabama Highway. And he would sit in his chair and play banjo all day and maybe sell a few antiques here and there. But, and he was really into kind of bluegrass and country music. And I think I got a lot of my, musical heritage from him. Because he listened to things like Flatt and Scruggs, and we'd watch all the country music shows on TV. He was a big Roger Miller fan. And
great writer.
Yeah, he was a great writer. And so I think I got some of my, lyrical instincts, I guess, from my father.
Mm-hmm. And your mom owned a bookstore?
Yeah, well, what happened was when I was 12, my dad got killed in a car wreck coming home from the antique store one afternoon. And I think about that all the time because, me and my brother would have been in the truck with him if we had gone to the store that day, but for whatever reason, we were not there. And he had a head-on collision with an 18-wheeler on the way home from work one day. So my mom, after he died, and she got a little bit of insurance money, she sold the antiques and kept all the books and moved the bookstore into downtown Rome, Georgia. And so all the rest of my growing up years and into adulthood, she had a bookstore called the Coosa Valley Bookstore in downtown Rome. And back in the 60s, early 70s, there was the governor of Georgia was Lester Maddox. He was
yes, our hero.
Yeah, he was a full-blown kind of racist MFer, you know. He had a restaurant in Atlanta, and he used to chase the black folks out of his restaurant with an axe handle.
Jesus.
Anyway,
he was before George Wallace.
Yeah, well, George Wallace was the governor of Alabama.
Oh, that's
and
right.
Maddox was the governor of Georgia.
I forgot. Yeah, you were not in Alabama.
Yeah, they were like the racist Bobby twins or something.
Right.
And anyway, one day, my mother's bookstore was right across the street from the county courthouse. So one day, we see Lester Maddox. We're looking out the window, and we see Lester Maddox coming down the steps of the courthouse. And my mother goes, "Oh no, he's coming in here.
She had all the Yellow Dog Democrat books in there, or what?
Well, no, she didn't. She was pretty conservative.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, he did come in the bookstore, and I had been in the back, and I had my foot up on a stool or something. I was cutting my toenails when Lester came in, and my mother got real embarrassed because Lester Maddox came in and
While you're doing
saw
your
me cutting
toenails.
my toenails. So there you go, Lester, something to remember me by.
Yeah, that's right. I'll give you my toenail clippings next
Yeah.
time. So,
Anyway, go ahead.
well, no, go ahead.
So anyway, growing up like we did, we were, my first musical heroes were people like Elvis Presley and, pre-Beatles. But when the Beatles came along, we started really getting into music and wanted a guitar, and all the bands around my neighborhood, all the kids wanted to play guitar. So after my dad died, my mother put together a little money and she bought us a guitar. I was probably 12, maybe 13. And that lasted for about a year, but all the kids wanted to play guitar, and I said, well, I'll play bass. And so we went to the Western Auto. No, my cousin who worked at Sears, he got me a bass. My first bass was a Hagstrom, red Hagstrom bass. So that's how I started playing bass. And, I was terrible, I think, but everybody around the neighborhood thought I was pretty good because I had an actual bass guitar.
Right.
And nobody else did.
Right. You could kind of get away with that back then.
Yeah. So,
There were not a whole lot of really great bass players, as I recall.
yeah, there weren't.
In rock, especially, yeah.
But, and it was a few, I'd already been in a couple of bands when I met Wes.
Uh-huh.
But I had a friend named Ronnie Gray, and Ronnie had an older brother, Frank, who played the bass, and Wes had an older brother, Dennis, who played guitar.
And was really good. Yeah.
So that's how I heard about Wes. And Ronnie and Wes and I got together one day at my house, and Wes had been in the marching band, so he put together a drum kit from old marching drums. And we started playing together, and we played together up until probably for 6 or 7 years, until our early 20s.
Right. And then he ended up moving out to Santa Barbara around the same time as you, didn't he?
He moved to the Santa Barbara area, Southern California.
Right.
And he was really the reason why I got out to California.
Really? Did he move first?
He moved first, and I had gotten married when I was 15, got my girlfriend pregnant, had a daughter, my daughter Joni, and so I was living in Rome and, working a job, playing whatever gigs I could come up with on the weekends. And if it hadn't been for Wes at that time, I would have probably, I don't know how I would have ever gotten out of Rome. But he had been calling me, him and my other friend Ronnie Gray had been calling me to come out to California, and I got a tax refund and flew out to Santa Barbara.
And you were how old, 22?
I was 20 years old.
20 years old,
Yeah.
Okay. And you and Wes and I are all the same age, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now you guys were in rock bands together pretty much?
Well, we got into playing, we were in the beginning.
Yeah.
We played, like Allman Brothers, Fleetwood Mac kind of thing.
Right.
But then as we got later in our teens, we started getting into jazz. We had this friend who was really into jazz and a really good guitar player. So when I was in my late teens, I got into hearing a lot of jazz, and so that's kind of how I came in to blues, is, you know, through the back door.
Yeah, and you guys went and saw quite a few people in Atlanta, didn't you say, both
Yeah,
of you?
yeah, we did.
Yeah. You
There
guys
was a
would see
club.
jazz and blues people.
There was a
and
club
rock.
in Atlanta called the 12th Gate,
Right.
and it was just a little coffee house kind of place in an old house. But they brought in all kinds of people there.
Did we go by there one time?
We may have driven by
I think we did. Yeah.
because they would
Yeah.
they were bringing people for a week at a time,
Right.
back like you could do,
Yeah.
you know, in the 70s. And
Right.
you know, I saw people like you know, Elvin Jones and Bill Evans, Big Mama Thornton. I saw
Right.
there with George Smith. That was kind
Wow.
of my first
Blues
real
thing.
blues
Yeah.
show, you know.
Right.
And then local bands would play there. I know Little Feat played there when they were
Huh.
just starting out.
Now, did you see the Allman Brothers early on?
I did see the Allman Brothers, and around 1970, the Allman Brothers played in my hometown at Ford Theater,
Really?
and
That was
at
with
Berry
Dwayne?
Lodge. Yeah, that was the original band
Okay. Wow.
with Dwayne. That was. I don't remember much about it because I used to smoke a little bit of weed,
Among other things.
among other things.
Yeah, you and Wes were bad boys, weren't you?
Well, I always think about this was the year I turned 18 in Georgia, they lowered the drinking age to 18.
Mm-hmm.
So I could go into a liquor store, play bars, anything when I was 18 years old.
Right.
And then when I moved to California when I was 20, the drinking age was 21. All of a sudden I had to get somebody to buy me beer.
Go buy your beer, yeah.
That was messed up.
Yeah. So what was the scene in California and Santa Barbara? What was that like?
Well, the first band that I played with there, that Wes and I played with, was kind of a California country kind of band.
Uh-huh.
And, the scene was, the way I remember it was not a lot of blues, but a lot more, at least the scene that I got into was a lot more country.
Yeah.
And, but I did meet up with some people that were very influential in my playing and my music. A guy named Nick Connolly.
Who's in Austin.
He was an organ player.
Right.
And he had a guitar player named Buddy Smith.
Right, who was a huge influence around there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Nick
Santa
and Buddy
Barbara.
were, became good friends, and they were, my major blues influences.
Right. And I think, didn't Buddy play with Kim for a while?
Yeah, Buddy played with
Kim Wilson, yeah.
Back in
When he was Goleta Slim.
in Goleta Slim, and that would have been in the early 70s, before Kim left for Austin. But Kim would come back into Santa Barbara and do gigs, not with the T-Birds, but just come in and do gigs with Buddy and Nick and put together a band and play local shows.
Right.
So that was when, the first time I saw Kim. And, the Santa Barbara Blues Society started up in about 78.
Right, I remember that.
And
At the Bluebird Cafe.
They brought in a lot of people. I saw Lewis Myers, Gatemouth Brown.
They had everybody.
John Lee Hooker and all kinds of people like that.
And that was all
Charlie
at the
Muscle.
That was all at the Bluebird.
Well,
Or did
they would do it at
other places?
different venues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I used to play at Bluebird sometimes.
Right. I played there with Johnny Waters, I remember. Mississippi Johnny Waters.
I was probably around at
You
that
could have
time,
been, yeah.
but
That was about 1978 or 77.
Yeah, I wouldn't have known who you were.
Right. Now.
But I remember seeing Ramblin' Jack Elliott there at the Bluebird.
Wow.
He was rambling.
He was rambling.
He was on a ramble.
Rambling. So eventually, not long after that, Wes, I guess on Kim's advice, moved to Austin,
Yeah.
and then you followed, right?
Well, it was it took a while. But yeah, Wes moved about 79, I think, moved to
Okay.
Austin. And then Nick Connolly, not long after that, went too. But I stayed, Beth and I had gotten married.
Right.
So, I stayed in Santa Barbara and,
Your current wife.
yeah, my current wife. And, I was just playing around with local country bands, bar bands, whatever gigs I could find. Maybe every now and then doing a blues gig or one of the blues jams. And, I always had it in the back of my head to move to Austin. But, really, in those days, I was pretty much of a mess.
From drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, from just drinking.
Yeah.
Drinking and drugs. And so instead of going to Austin, Beth and I, we got in a big fight or something, and I moved back to Georgia.
Oh,
And
okay.
through the mid 80s, she eventually came back, and we lived in Rome, Georgia, from I think about 83 through 88.
Okay.
And I was in a country band there called the Texas Valley Strangers. We were a honky-tonk bar band. But then...
Are you playing upright in that
No,
band?
I was
or
playing
electric?
all electric bass.
All electric. Okay.
All electric bass.
Yeah.
And, I started getting into trying to write songs. I had always, I'd always been someone who listened a lot to songwriters and lyrics. I was very influenced by it. I think that came from my father. Being interested in the storytelling aspect of songs, So I started getting into trying to write songs when I was in the Texas Valley Strangers. And I wrote some pretty good ones.
How many songs do you think you've written? Have you ever added it up?
I've never added it all up, but it's probably, it's nothing like some people are very prolific and I'm not, but it's probably 40.
40 songs?
40 or...
Yeah.
But I have a lot of ideas. I mean, sometimes I'll wake up in the morning with an idea,
Right.
I'll dream an idea.
Right.
And,
Right.
But I was never very good at putting it all together.
Now, do you think, is there a favorite time you have for writing? Is it usually in the morning?
In the morning.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, in the morning, or, even when I was on the road with you for all those years, I like to ride in the van.
Interesting.
Or
Okay.
on the plane.
Interesting.
Or in the,
Okay.
a lot of times I would have a part-time day gig as a courier when I wasn't on the road, and that was one of my favorite times to write.
Really?
Yeah, because I would be just by myself
Yeah.
and observing whatever was going on around me, and that's how I wrote like Detroit Blues. And,
Okay.
so yeah, that was always when I have time to think with no distractions.
Right. That's the whole
you know.
thing. No distractions. Yeah. Yeah. I always find morning is a great time for me.
Yeah, morning is a
Yeah.
good time.
Yeah.
And late, I guess maybe some people write late at night.
Yeah.
I can't really.
Yeah.
I don't do good late at night. I just think
Right.
because my brain gets too tired.
Yeah. It's interesting how there's certain times the ideas just flow.
Yeah.
I noticed that time between like being awake and being asleep is like really a great time. Like sometimes middle of the night or early in the morning.
Yeah, I've numerous times woken up with, excuse me, lyrics. I know one time I dreamed a whole song.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was after I'd moved from Austin to Dallas.
Uh-huh.
And I'd been in a period of being really strung out. And I woke up one morning and I dreamed a whole song and wrote it down right there. And I still have it.
Yeah. You ever recorded it?
No, I never did. I wrote a lyric sheet out and sent it to my sister, and she had it framed and sent around to everybody in the family.
Wow.
I'll sing it to you sometime.
So we're talking about songwriting with R.W. Grigsby here. And we're talking about the best times to write a song, which we think is a very solitary thing. Now, in terms of writing with other people, how helpful is that?
Well, I've found that it's hard for me to write with other people.
Right.
Because, I haven't done it that much, mostly what we've done together.
Yeah.
And it's harder to keep it in a cohesive direction, I feel like, when you're writing with someone else.
It's funny because, I've tried to write, you and Carol Perry are probably my two guys that I've written the most with. I tried writing with some other people and really, I've written with Rick a little bit, but some people I have a real hard time writing with.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to have a certain chemistry to be able to do it, I think.
Yeah.
Now, Beth and I have written, quite a few songs together where we've collaborated, or I've started with an idea and she would finish it.
Mm-hmm.
Or she has some lyrics that I just, edit a little bit and put to music.
Right.
So that's been fairly easy.
Yeah.
Because she knows me so well that
right. Kind of knows what you're trying to say.
Knows what I'm trying to say.
Right.
But anyway, want to get back to how I got to Austin?
Yes, I do. Well, let me ask you this: did you move to Austin first or Dallas first?
I moved to Austin first.
All right.
And this is the way it happened. And this also has to do with Wes, because he was already. We had in 1984. He called me up and asked if I wanted to do this tour he had going with a guy named Fingers Taylor, a friend of ours.
All right.
And I said, yeah, I'd love to. I hadn't been on the road before.
Right.
So we went out to Jackson, Mississippi, and got together and rehearsed at Fingers' parents' house. And that was my first time being on the road. And it lasted probably, I think 3 little tours with Fingers.
And Fingers was Jimmy Buffett's harp player
at
the time, and also had his own career because he'd played with quite a few different people, Larry Raspberry and the High Steppers, and he'd done a lot of blues things with different people in Memphis. And
this was around the time he put out a record called Harpoon.
Right. I remember it.
Anson and Wes both played on it.
They sure did. Kenny Blu-ray.
And so we did that, and I first met Sam Myers.
Right.
That was before Sam and Anson.
And Fingers and Sam were really tight.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was how Anson got a hold of Sam.
Right.
It was through Fingers.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, moving on, about 3 or 4 years later, I got another call from Wes. And I was pretty, Beth had already left.
Again.
She got pissed off, and left and had moved to Austin when we had another friend living out in Austin.
Right.
So she had moved to Austin, had a job and a house, and all the things that, a bass player needs. And, I had gotten in a lot of trouble that year around Rome.
Okay.
I got fired from my job. I got a DUI. Things weren't going that well. So when I got the call from Wes, if I wanted to come out, he heard about this band, Evan Johns and the H-Bombs, who were looking for a bass player.
Right.
And if I wanted to come out and audition, I could do that. So I left. I played a gig Friday and Saturday night. Saturday night, I had a gig at the old Cotton Block Saloon in Rome. Played till midnight. Went to the Twin Oaks, got a couple drinks and to-go cups, and left Rome after midnight, driving to Austin.
Wow.
And I had a 70.
That's all she wrote.
Yeah. I had a 73 Primer Black Pontiac.
Beautiful.
I threw my bass amp and bass and a bag of clothes in the car and drove to Austin. And I got there, did the audition, and didn't get the gig.
Really?
Yeah. Because they had tried out another bass player the weekend before.
Uh-huh.
And Evan told me, this was his words exactly, I really think you're a better bass player, but this other guy's got a brand new van. So,
some things are more important than bass playing.
Yeah. So the other guy got the gig.
Right.
But I just stayed, and I stayed. Beth and I got back together,
Mm-hmm.
and I stayed in Austin, and eventually, after a little time, I started going out, going to jams, and working through a temporary labor pool, and I was up on the roof. Tearing a roof off of this house, and the guy I was working with, he said, "Yeah, I know these guys that are looking for a bass player, and or they might be." And he gave me a number, and I called my friend Lance Womack, and started playing around Austin. And eventually Lance got to know Ponty Bone from the
right.
Joe Ely band.
Right.
He'd been a member of Joe Ely's band. And I got the gig playing bass with Ponty Bone.
Okay.
Ponty Bone and the Squeeze Tones.
And how long were you with him?
A couple of years. We did some fun stuff, through.
Didn't Tony Gagne have something to do in there?
No, well, Tony, Djama Gagne
Right.
is Tony's brother, and Djama was
okay.
playing guitar with Ponty
Okay.
when I was in there.
Okay.
So that was the connection there.
Did you guys ever do anything with Dylan?
No, we did get backstage passes to see Dylan in Dallas
Uh-huh.
one time. So I got to stand like right off stage with Bob.
Uh-huh.
And of course, he didn't talk to anybody.
Right.
But it was funny because I was talking to somebody else about this the other day, and I seem to remember that G.E. Smith was the guitar player then.
Right.
But Bob didn't let him take a solo. It seemed like Bob would take all the guitar solos.
Really? Wow.
So that was kind of funny.
Crazy.
But anyway,
So how long were you with Ponty? A
I
couple
was
years?
with Ponty for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And that's when I started going, doing gigs up in Canada.
Right.
At Cam
Edmonton,
Hayden at the City
yeah.
Media Club.
Right.
Did the Edmonton Folk Festival. and went to toured Europe for the first time,
Right.
about 89. And through playing with Pawnee, I met a drummer named Bobby Irwin.
Mm-hmm.
Bobby had played with Rockpile, and he was a British guy, so he knew Nick Lowe and Dave Edmunds and all those kind of people.
Mm-hmm.
And Bobby had a gig playing with Carlene Carter. So,
Johnny Cash's daughter.
well,
Stepdaughter.
June Carter's daughter.
June Carter's daughter.
Yeah.
Daughter, right.
Right. And she had been married to Nick Lowe. And,
Right, right.
Carlene, in 1990, I think it was, had a big hit record.
Right.
And Bobby was playing drums, and the bass player had other obligations and couldn't go. So Bobby called me, and I got the chance to fly to Nashville and audition with Carlene, and got the gig and toured with her all through the summer of 1990.
Mm-hmm.
And, got to tour behind her record in the top 10, which was, it was a big deal for me.
Big deal,
you
yeah.
know.
Yeah, hell yeah.
So I was hoping to, I was a mess back
Yeah.
then.
How long did you last with her?
I was in there all through the summer of 1990.
Okay.
And I remember the day that we played in New York City, and we had a gig opening for Rodney Crowell.
Right.
And, it was some of the biggest shows I had ever done.
Mm-hmm.
And, Paul Schaefer was there, and we went out and heard Doug Somm and the Texas Tornadoes after the gig, and I got pretty high. I got pretty drunk. And we're walking back. I don't remember this. Somebody told me this story.
Uh-huh.
We were walking back into the hotel in the middle of the night, and I had a full beer in my hand or something.
Uh-huh.
And the doorman was going, "Hey, you can't bring that in here."
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know, I'm not sure what I said, but he said to me, "Well, don't do it again." And I said, "There ain't gonna be no next time, cuz." And
that went over like a lead balloon.
that didn't go over too good. The next morning after the gig,
Yeah.
Carlene wanted to have a meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and so we went to breakfast, and they sent everybody home. The whole band. They canceled the rest of the tour because she was losing money, and
Yeah.
even with a record in the top 10,
Right.
it was still too much to have a bus and
Right.
sound men and
Right.
a driver.
Too expensive, yeah.
Yeah. So they sent everybody home, and that was the last of it for me.
Wow.
I never got the call back to go back, which was disappointing, but I went back with Pawnee
Mm-hmm.
for a few more months, and then Lance and I both left Pawnee's band and joined with Gary Primitch.
Okay.
And
And you were with Primitch for what, 3 years?
yeah, 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah.
with
And you
Primitch.
made 1 or 2 records with Gary?
2 records.
2 records
Well,
with Gary
yeah.
on Blacktop.
Well, we made one called My Pleasure. It was on Amazing Records.
Oh yeah, right.
Remember
I remember that.
If it's a
yeah.
hit, it's amazing. That was a.
Yeah, best theme of all time.
I'm very surprised that you weren't on Amazing Records.
I should have been on Amazing, because if it would have been a hit, it would have been
It was
amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But I
That's
made
true.
one on Amazing Records, and then after a few years with Gary, then I joined up with Mike Morgan and the Crawl.
Right. And I met you when you were with Gary.
Yeah.
I want to say that was late 1990. Or maybe early 1990. I can't
Now, did we
remember.
do gigs with Gary?
We
and
did three
Fingers?
and four. No, we did 3 or 4 nights with Gary.
Yeah.
Because I came down and did what's his name's harp,
Eddie Stout.
Eddie Stout's
Yeah.
harmonica roundup or whatever he called it. Yeah, I did that, and then I played like 3 gigs with you and Gary, and I don't even remember what month it was, but it was sometime in 1990. It seemed like it was either the beginning or the end. I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
Yeah, but I remember you were a mess. We
Me?
barely talked. I mean, me and you barely talked. You just kind of were in the back of the
I was in the back.
of the van,
But,
and it was like,
you know,
you kind of were in your own world.
Yeah, well, you were up there in the front telling stories.
Right, I was telling stories with Gary,
Yeah.
and Shorty, right.
But where did we get to?
But you were now. Were you a junkie at that point?
Oh no,
You weren't. Okay.
Not yet. No.
You were just drinking.
Yeah, I was just drinking.
So when did you start shooting up? Was that with Mike?
It was the end of my time with Gary,
Okay.
kind of when we were in the transition.
Yeah.
But what happened with Gary is it was kind of weird because we were out on the road somewhere and we stayed out. At that time, you remember what it was like.
Sure,
We
yeah.
stayed out. We'd stay out
Months.
for months at a time.
Yeah.
But I remember Gary called me to his hotel room one morning, and if Gary ever called you to the hotel room,
That meant it was over.
that meant something was up. you
Right.
know.
Right.
So he called me to the hotel room, and he said, "You know, I've been thinking about making some changes,
Look out.
but you know, Mike Morgan's looking for a bass player. So, you know, I would never do this to you, but here you go." So he kind of traded me
Right.
off, you know.
Right.
And
Now, what do you think Gary was doing at that point? Was he drinking a lot, or?
you
Not
know,
really.
Gary was not really drinking a lot,
Yeah.
and I never knew Gary to do any drugs
No.
when I was with him
Yeah.
until later.
Yeah.
You know,
And that was a real shock.
yeah, it was a
Yeah.
real shock.
Yeah.
But anyway, he traded me off to Mike Morgan and the Crawl, and that
Uh-huh.
was it was great for me.
Yeah.
I mean, it was.
Right.
I'm glad he did it. Now, if you talk to Mike,
Mm-hmm.
he probably has a different story of how it went down. That's the way I remember it.
Yeah. And how long were you with Mike?
For a couple years,
And did you did a couple albums with those guys?
yeah.
On
I did
Blacktop?
a couple of Blacktop records, one with Mike and Lee McBee,
Right.
and then we did one with Jim Sewler, Mike
Oh,
Morgan
okay.
and Jim Sewler.
Interesting.
And then we did another one, which after I had already left the band, I came back to do the record with them, with Mike and the singer Chris Wynot.
Right. Right.
And so there were 3 on Blacktop records that I did.
Right.
Um, But when I left Mike, and I left him in a bind,
Did you?
yeah, because I mean, I was just at the end. I'd gotten strung out for a couple of years, and you know, I really did want to get clean.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so Mike had a 7-week tour booked,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, I just went to him and said, I can't do it. I'm gonna,
Mhm.
you know, I'm gonna have to try to get clean, and I did.
Right.
Left a band, went back to Georgia, checked into a detox rehab, and started the process of getting sober.
So that was early 90s or mid 90s?
That was 1995.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And over the next few months, I did get sober. And then I went back with Gary's band the early part of 96 and stayed with him for about 5 or 6 months.
Okay.
And we did we did another Blacktop record.
Oh, okay.
That
So
time.
you're
We
on
did the one
2
called-
Black Tops with him.
It's called Company Man.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a really good record.
Now, did you guys write together, you and Gary?
No, I never wrote with Gary.
Really?
No.
Did you ever
Gary-
write with Mike at all?
We did one song that I wrote,
Uh-huh.
but was never recorded. No, we
Huh.
never wrote together.
Okay.
You know, him and Lee McBee wrote together.
Right.
And
That's
Gary wrote a lot with guitar player Mark Corpy.
Oh, I remember Mark Corpy. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
Really
still
good
around.
guitar player.
Yeah,
and
he's still around
a
in
good driver.
Florida, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, and after I left Gary, the second time, I got sober. It wasn't, moved back to California. Beth and I were back together.
Now, did you guys move here? Or did you move to Santa Barbara?
We moved to Sacramento. She had
Okay.
already come to Sacramento. When I was all strung out, she had moved back to Sacramento,
Right.
where she had family here.
So basically, you were in a position to get back together with because you were sober.
Yeah.
Now, was she
Yeah.
sober already?
We got sober at around the same time.
Around the same time.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And once back in Sacramento, getting sober was hard. And for about a year, I didn't play any gigs at all.
Mm-hmm. Was it just because you were scared to?
I didn't know what to do, to tell you the truth. I did not know what to do. I put the bass under the bed and just kind of focused on getting my, sobriety together.
Right.
But I did have all these songs that I had bits and pieces and ideas of a lot of songs. And that's one thing that I did musically then, is I started putting them all together and completing things that I had just had, a framework for some of them,
Right.
bits and pieces for other ones.
Right.
So somewhere I have demos of a whole bunch of songs that I wrote back then.
Mm-hmm.
One of them I did last night, Sherry Ann. That's
Oh,
one of
okay.
the old songs.
Yeah.
that I
So did you write any sobriety songs? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I
Okay.
did.
Yeah.
I did. Every song that I write is a sobriety song.
Okay.
Really.
No, I believe you, man.
If you think about a
Yeah.
song like one that we did together, Detroit Blues.
Right.
I'd originally started it as a song called Wall Street Blues.
Right.
But
I remember. Yeah.
the beginning of the song comes straight out of the 12 steps. Step number 10.
Okay.
When we were wrong, promptly admitted it.
Oh, okay.
Well, I know I was wrong.
I was wrong. Yeah.
But,
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay.
so in a sense, everything I write is a sobriety song.
So you changed the lyric to that when the 2007 crash, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's one of the songs that I wrote when I was working. We had already started touring together.
Right.
And I was working as a courier and driving around and looking around, and there were people in ditches and tents and people
Closed up
losing
stores.
closed up stores.
Yeah.
And that's where
Right.
it came from.
Right. Yeah, I'd like to get into that a little bit with you about just what songs are inspired by what, like incidents or just reflection or. I mean, I know Jackknifed came from our.
Yeah, Jackknifed was a good one, man.
that came out.
That came from
That
Anson.
came out of a definite experience. Yeah, hitting
Anson,
a deer. Yeah.
Well, it started with before then we had been out, and Anson and Wes had taken the van. One
Right.
night.
Oh yeah, I remember
Anson
that.
jackknifed the
He
van.
jackknifed the van in the trailer, right?
So that's where the name of it
Oh,
came
interesting.
from.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that. That was in New York,
And yeah, it was,
Marlboro,
'cause
New York. Yeah.
we had been playing. What was the name of that?
The
club?
Falcon.
The Falcon.
Right.
That guy died.
I know he did.
He
Yeah.
was what was his name?
He was a great guy,
great
man.
guy.
Great guy.
I loved playing at the
Yeah.
Falcon.
Yeah. I'm blanking on his name right now, but yeah, he was a great guy. Great club.
Anyway, to get back to after I sobered up, after about a year, I started playing again and got with a band called the Hucklebucks.
Right.
And played with them for a few years.
Right.
Then we left, went to Florida, moved to Florida, and I had already known Johnny Sansone from my crawl days. He came to do gigs with us, and so I started playing with Johnny some, got back with Johnny and Fingers, touring with them, and eventually came back to California, and that's where I met Andy Santana, started playing with the Hucklebucks, then joined your band.
Right.
And was there for 12 years?
Yeah. And Andy Santana, I forgot that you played with Andy, because I remember that's how I got your name, was Jimmy Mullen, who did a gig with you. He said, I think I got a bass player for you.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what happened. He was raving about you. He goes, he's another Ronnie James, or something like that. And so that's how, and then we met. We ended up meeting at the Torch that time. And that's an interesting story.
Yes, it is.
That I came up to you and you said, remember me? I played with you with Gary Primitz. I said, how long have you been sober?
Yeah.
It's so bizarre.
It was a bizarre thing.
That is so bizarre, yeah.
Because, when you're strung out and drinking every day, you get a really hollow look.
Right.
And then after a few years of sobriety, you meet the same person, and it's like a different person.
Right, exactly.
All of a sudden they're animated, they're talking.
They got something there.
They got something to say. It's a real human being.
That's
it's not just a shell.
Right,
of a
exactly.
person,
Yeah, because I didn't remember anything about you with Primitz, except that you would be in the back. That's all I remembered.
Well, I know we played at JJ's.
We played
Bar.
JJ's and we played a few other places. I think we played Pearls.
You remember the harmonica playing bartender?
Oh God, yeah. He was so obnoxious. Start playing behind the bar in the middle of your solos. Yeah, he was something else.
We play a club sometimes in Kelseyville that has a flute playing bartender.
Oh, good.
So you'll be playing along,
really
and all of a sudden you'll hear a flute.
Jesus. Yeah. So you met Doug, your guitar player, back then.
Yeah.
I've
known Doug and Robert Sidwell.
Right, Sidwell,
For a long, and Kenny Marchese for a long time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know Kenny was in the Hucklebucks.
Yeah, Kenny was in there.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, the way I met those guys was there was a guy named Pete who I knew from, not to break anyone's anonymity, but I'll break my own. I knew him from meetings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Pete told me he knew about this guitar player that was played with the Hucklebucks, and that's how I met Kenny.
Okay.
And then Kenny left to become a cop.
And then Doug ended up playing, he played saxophone, I think, at first.
He played saxophone and harmonica.
And harmonica, and then he eventually started playing guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So that's how that all started.
Yeah. So, and Robert played with us for a while, too.
Yeah.
Robert Sidwell, we did a lot of time together on the road, R-Dub.
We sure did.
Me and you, behind the wheel,
to music.
Listening to music, yes. Hours and hours of fun.
But there are several times that I consider pivotal times when I learned a lot musically. One was after I first got to Austin and started playing with Ponty Bone, because it was a real musical gumbo. We'd play anything from Creole, top Zydeco, straight blues and shuffles, country songs, all kinds of, we played Mexican polkas,
Yeah.
and it all kind of just fit together.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to meet a lot of people, like Doug Somm would sometimes come out and sit in. And that was a real learning experience. And also, after I joined your band and started doing the harmonica blowouts and meeting, some of the top guys and harmonica players and musicians, blues players in the country.
Right.
And that
Right.
it was a big deal for me.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a big deal for all of us because to be able to hang around a Snooky or a Cotton or Lazy Lester, Billy Boy, and then all the guys of our generation that are great harp players, Rick or Kim or Rod, any of those guys, and
I remember the first time I backed up Cotton on one of your shows.
Mm-hmm. That was when you first joined.
When I first joined,
Mm-hmm.
and we were at a gig. We were at sound check, and Cotton would sit in his chair, right? He was really good at sound checks.
Oh yeah, he was great at sound checks.
He was always the best.
He played his best playing at sound checks.
And we were doing the tune. Was it last night? The one ba ba da.
Yeah. Right.
And he started it out, and I started that bass line, and he looked back and smiled at me.
Because you knew the line.
Because I knew the line.
Right.
He gave me just a big smile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff is worth. That kind of stuff is
man.
worth millions.
That was so good.
It really
man.
is. Yeah. When those old guys dug you, there was
Yeah.
there was a lot to be said when the old guys dug what you were doing, man. That was kind of a priceless thing. Yeah.
Where did we get to?
Well, we were talking about Golden State. We ought to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because we started that in, I want to say we started working with you and Wes in 2010. I remember that because we did a tour with Mike Morgan. We did, did we do tours with Rusty at that point? I can't remember.
I don't remember doing one with Rusty and Wes.
No, I don't think so. But we started working with Wes. We did one with Josh Falero. I remember that. Quite a few different gigs, and then little Charlie came in 2011, I think, or he was in 2011 or 2012.
Well, I remember we did a European tour with little Charlie,
with Charlie
and
Marty, right?
Just
Marty
as
Dotson.
a quartet.
Yeah,
and that was a
great
lot of
tour.
fun,
Yeah,
man.
that was a great tour. One of the funnest European tours we did, and I think it was just because I rented a car.
Yeah.
And we were
did
kind of our own
ourselves.
bosses. Yeah, we were our own bosses. And we were able to schedule things the way we wanted. And it worked out really great to have time off in between a couple gigs. And the gigs were real fun. Yeah, that was a ball. And then eventually by 2012, we started the band with Anson, who I'd been after through Wes for a while.
Yeah.
And it was really kind of originally, we didn't know how it was going to go, and it turned out to be something really great.
It was, I mean, there was such a contrast between Anson and Charlie.
Right.
And how they worked together, it seemed like it wouldn't work, but it did.
But it did. Yes.
Because Anson would instinctively know when to just lay back and
Hold it down. Yeah.
Back up Charlie.
Right.
With a smile on his face. and,
wouldn't get rattled.
Wouldn't get rattled at all.
Yeah. And then the interesting thing is what good friends they became.
Yeah,
through the whole thing. Because you kind of wouldn't have assumed that, but it did work.
Captain and the Pup?
The Captain and the Pup, yeah. They ended up working out to be really good friends, so,
It's interesting, too, how Charlie would back up Anson when Anson would do a song.
Right.
Because Charlie's
Yeah.
playing was real jagged, but
Yeah.
somehow he made it work.
He'd make it work.
Somehow he always made it work.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But Charlie always would push you
He
to
would.
play.
Yes.
I mean, I always felt like he pushed me to play better than I can play.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, it was
challenged me.
interesting. It was interesting working with Charlie because, in a lot of ways, because he was so competitive in what he did, it was kind of like you wanted to be sort of in that same zone in terms of coming up with stuff that was creative.
Yeah.
So he kind of forced you into a certain creativity that I think most people wouldn't do. I mean, I certainly didn't push myself the same way, say, playing with someone like Rusty. You know, I wouldn't push myself the same way I did with Charlie. I really pushed myself.
Yeah.
And so that was an interesting factor as well.
Well, I mean, there would be a certain part of the night every night when it was Charlie's part of the show, and he would, you know, just off the cuff call out whatever jazz or thing he wanted to do.
We had some funny moments with that.
You know, and I was expected to follow him. You
Right.
know, I'm not, you know.
Or the night with the gal that his friend that sat in.
Oh, that was so funny.
He
man.
called a tune that she didn't even know, I think.
And the funniest thing is that instead of doing, in turn, just doing a blues and
Right.
let's just play a blues and
Right.
you sing this,
Right.
she just walks off stage. And she's like, gets up and it's introduced and then just walks off. And then so I remember the song Charlie called Undecided.
Right.
And we had rehearsed it maybe once or twice, you
Right.
know, like 6 or 8 months ago. I had no idea what he was playing. So I just started walking, man.
Right.
And Charlie got really mad. We had words backstage.
Oh, yeah.
And then we had to drive back together.
What fun.
What fun. But he
I thought
made amends.
I
he
thought the
bought me
woman
breakfast.
I thought the woman sang.
She never sang.
She
She never sang.
Oh, that's so great,
I'm-
man.
Yeah.
That is so great. That was in Santa Barbara, I think.
Yeah. Well, that was San Luis Obispo.
Oh, was that San Luis Obispo?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, we were on the road a ton.
We were.
We were on the road, I want to say 150 days a year at that point.
Yeah.
And we're a bunch of old guys in our 60s. And somehow we made it through.
Well, I think we made it for close to 5 years.
Yeah, it was about 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And man, it went by just like in the
Yeah.
blink of an eye.
Right. Sure
I mean,
did.
looking back on it.
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of that was just when you're on the road that much, time seems to speed up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like it's done before you know it. You know, you've done a year.
Right.
It's kind of a crazy thing.
It's like this time is speeding by that we're talking.
Oh
right
God,
now.
yes, sure is. So anyway, let's get into to 2019. You're still working for me, and then the pandemic hit, and everyone was out of work, and then you ended up having a stroke. In what month was that?
I had the stroke
July or something?
in September of 2020.
Okay,
September the
2020.
4th, 2020.
Yeah.
And I kind of look back at it now like there was a series of things that kind of happened. You know, little Charlie died.
Right, and he died early on.
Yeah,
He
Probably.
died probably I want to say February or March.
yeah, I think
I
it
think
was,
it was March. Yeah.
And that was the beginning of the pandemic.
Right.
You know, and then the pandemic hits. We're all out of work.
Right.
And then, you know, I have the stroke. and was in the hospital almost a month.
And Beth couldn't even see you.
No, she couldn't even see me because
Right.
of COVID. Everything was in lockdown. So she dropped me off and didn't see me for, I think it was 28 days or something.
Jesus.
But I remember that, you know, the night that it happened, well, it was the night before, I was brushing my teeth and I felt really weak. That's all I can say is I felt really weak, and
Yeah.
I was having trouble brushing my teeth.
So your whole body felt weak.
Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
super tired and
Yeah.
just went to bed, you know.
Uh-huh.
And the next morning, I was still walking, still doing all the normal things.
Mm-hmm.
If I had gone to the hospital then, I could have probably gotten the shots to break up the clot, and it wouldn't have been so bad.
Yeah.
But by the time I got to the hospital, and then sat in the, you know, in the waiting room for 5 hours.
God almighty.
By the time they got me to a room, I was out. I could not,
That's
couldn't
unbelievable.
walk, couldn't move this side of my body at all. Could just barely whisper. So,
So did you tell them you thought you were having a stroke?
well, when I got there, the first thing they did
Blood
was
pressure.
they took me, they did some tests, and the doctor said, well, I think you had a stroke. And if you had gotten here last night, we could have given you these shots. But what they did instead, because there were no rooms,
Right.
it was during COVID,
Right.
I went out and sat in the waiting room for 5 hours.
Unbelievable.
So by the time I got in the room,
Yeah.
you know,
It was really bad.
yeah, it was really bad.
Yeah.
But, you know, I feel grateful now because I know that, man, a lot of people don't survive that,
Or recover.
or they don't recover from
Right.
that.
Right.
And, you know, I've recovered a lot. I would say I've recovered, you know, the right side, maybe 50%. My hand is,
Well,
hand is
originally you
flat.
could only move your little finger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could only move my little finger.
Yeah.
I do everything, most things I can do.
So the fact you can play bass and
I can play bass, but I can't use these fingers.
really
I can use them, but they're so slow that I use a thumb pick to
use
play.
a thumb pick. Okay.
Yeah,
And how did you play before? You played with your fingers?
I played with my fingers or
Yeah.
my thumb,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew how to, you know, I knew how to use a pick and play
Uh-huh.
with my thumb.
Yeah.
And when I first got back from the stroke, I tried playing with my thumb, but I can't get my wrist coordinated enough to really play with any consistency.
Right.
And then, you know, you have all kind. The brain is a weird instrument, man. You know, and so I have all kinds of, you know, issues with muscles and pain all through
Yeah.
my hands.
Yeah.
My right hand and my right arm and my right leg.
So it didn't affect your memory or anything like that?
That doesn't seem to affect my memory
Yeah. Okay.
at all. Now,
I just got to keep an eye on the time here. So, so basically, what you've done is you relearned to play, and then you and Beth started working Red's Blues a lot more once the pandemic kind of eased off a little bit.
yeah, we started.
And you guys work all the time around here.
You know, when I first got back from the hospital, and I couldn't really play yet, Beth hired Sid Morris to kind of play piano and play bass, and so Sid really helped me out when I first came back because he would cover the bass lines and I would just boom.
Right. You do your simple
Yeah.
thing, yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know, I've gotten to where I can play a lot of things now, and you know, I recorded a CD of all my own songs.
Yeah,
too.
which I love.
Um,
Yeah, it's a
So-
great CD. And what's the name of that Grigsby's truck stop?
Grigsby's Truck Stop.
Right. And do you do that? Do you mail order that?
Yeah, sure, I'll mail order it.
So do people go to Red's Blues to find that?
You can go to Red's Blues, or, well, I don't have my own website, so that's probably...
But basically you can get it off Red's Blues website. Okay. And I want to say that your songwriting to me on that is some of your best yet.
Yeah, I mean, I like it a lot, really.
Yeah. The opening song, Ford Fairlane, is such a great song.
And I don't even remember writing it.
Really?
Yeah, it's one of those songs, when I wasn't sure I had enough songs that I wanted to do for the CD, and I just, a couple of them, I just kind of made it up right on the spot.
Right on the spot. Well, I love this thing of that what you're doing now is you're kind of creating these almost, it's like to me what the ultimate songwriting is about, which is almost creating a film.
Yeah,
you write almost like you're creating a film.
I think of it as, imaging,
right.
And it's telling a story
Mm-hmm.
kind of through, I guess, what's the right word? Imagery.
Yeah.
Telling a story through imagery.
Yeah.
And if I can achieve that, I was also thinking about this, that some great songwriters can write, like Bob Dylan, say, for instance, can be very wordy.
Right.
He writes a lot of words.
Yeah.
If I can say more with less words, it's
but he has that ability, really.
He has the ability to
for imagery. I mean, I was going to say Jack of Hearts for me is like the ultimate.
Oh, there are so many of
song where he just paints a movie, pretty much in that song.
Lily, Rosemary, and the Jack of Hearts.
Right, that's such a great song, man. Yeah.
He's got a lot of those, man.
Yeah.
But I think Ford Fairlane,
that's a great song in that regard. I mean, and what you're doing is you're comparing your life to this car. This old car in the junkyard, basically, and what its life was like.
And I think it's a story of our country in a way.
Yeah.
And kind of a longing for things to be
what it used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Things to be more simple, and life is complicated now. Everybody wants to, take a simple slogan and make things better with a slogan, and you can't do that. We have big, complicated problems.
Right. Things are not black and white anymore. Yeah.
But, in my mind, I can still go there to a time when it seemed like things were that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other one I love on that album is I Believe.
Yeah.
Which to me is a great anthem, and I'm really hoping somebody will pick up on that and run with it,
One that I really like on there is Johnny on the Run.
Mm-hmm.
It's woke up at a truck stop in Wyoming.
Right, would you again? That comes from direct experience.
In the back seat of an old Ford van.
That's right.
Daylight crashing in my brain.
And that we did, man.
Said hello to the morning sun.
That was an incredible night,
for the day
man.
to come.
No motels in any of Wyoming. No motel rooms. My motel room was given away, and we ended up sleeping in the van by a truck stop. What a life.
What a life. And I got to say this, that Beth has helped me so much, not only personally, helped me recover, but also in keeping the band working and working hard, because she really does it all.
She hustles,
Yeah.
She hustles, and that's the only way you can really keep a band together, is to have somebody at the helm that's gonna just get the work, and getting the work is 90%.
Yeah, and how
playing it is easy.
that's why we've talked about this, that I haven't been going on the road or doing anything much like that, because the playing of the music is the easy part.
That's the easiest part. Yeah.
The hard part is everything that goes along with it.
Right. Getting there, getting into the hotel, doing the sound check, stopping for pee breaks or dinner or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the level, at a big higher level,
yeah,
I'm sure it's a lot easier. But
I'm sure it's easier, but there's still that thing. It's being in transit. The whole thing of being in transit. It doesn't matter if you're first class or no class. It's like it's always going to have a element of strain that's going to be there, because anything can happen. And that's when I do Jackknifed, I always explain that anything can happen. Weather, breakdowns, gigs getting canceled. There's a zillion things that come into it. Musicians disappearing in the middle of the gig, whatever. It's true. That stuff happens on every level.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. Hitting a deer at 75
Hitting a deer at 75 miles an hour.
On the first night of
on
the
the first night of the tour, yeah. We had a radiator go out on the last tour. The one before, actually. The radiator went out on the side of the road. We had 4 hours to get to the gig, and somehow we managed to find a garage to take the van, rent a vehicle. In 2 hours we did this, and got to the gig an hour late.
It's amazing, really, if you think about it. All the years and all the breakdowns and all the highways, somehow we never missed a gig.
I know. It's really amazing. It really is. And B.B. King used to say that. He goes, I think I've only missed like 3 gigs or something in his whole career. And it was, that's an amazing feat to be able to say that.
Yeah, the only time I ever missed a gig, except, if I was really sick or something.
Right.
I missed a gig drunk on the side of the road one time. And that was one of the things that happened that's like, man, I can't do this. I gotta,
No. And that was what sobered me up. The thing that sobered me up was when I got to that point where I said, I can either play music or I can do drugs and alcohol, but I can't make a living off of drugs and alcohol, so I better give that up to play music.
Yeah.
And that was the deciding factor for me.
That
was the crossroads.
That point where it's, what's important here anyway.
What's more important? Yeah. And it's great because you're so active in the program, and for that matter, God, so many of us are.
Yeah.
Almost everybody we know, if they're still alive, almost everybody we know has had to.
They've had to make the change.
They've had to make the choice.
That's
right. Because, to stay in this business and do it night after night, it's a hard friggin' job, man.
Yeah.
That was kind of what made me give it up, really, was I realized if I'm going to go out on the road, I can't do it. Do both at the same time.
Yeah. When you're doing both at the same time, I remember as a side man, getting high, getting loaded, whatever, and how angry the band leader would get at me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, you think about that whole thing of, I've heard the stories of, the T-Birds when they'd have to, they'd have to get the bass player, his drugs in advance so he could just get through the tour.
Yeah. I know those stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. Well, RW.
Yeah, it was a good talk.
Love you,
man.
bro.
Love you too, man.
Thank you, man.